Thank you. Libertarianism. Okay, I'm going to explain exactly what I mean, because it's good to define what you're talking about before we get into these things. And although most of the people out there will be libertarians, some of them may not be, and some of them who think they are may not be, and some of them who think they aren't may well be. So yeah, libertarianism. P.G. O'Rourke once said that it was like we were conservatives who like to get high, or we were capitalist hippies. But I don't think they're funny terms, but I don't think either is accurate. So what is libertarianism? Okay, well, I suppose there's the movement, and then there's the parties. You know, and I'm leader of the Scottish Libertarian Party, so we're a political party where we hold a minarchist position and we engage in the political system. Some of us are ANCAPs, anarcho-capitalists. I myself lean towards anarcho-capitalism. But we are a minarchist party. So you have to be, if you're engaging, that's the rules of the game when you engage in the political system. So there we go. So, but the movement wider, people would regard people like Yaron as being part of the libertarian movement in a wider sense. I'm sure he'll give us his reasons why he isn't later. Even the Tea Party movement had been regarded as within the libertarian framework. More conservatarians, even like the aforementioned P.G. O'Rourke, would be regarded as libertarian in some senses. But let's just talk about primarily the political philosophy. It's primarily a political philosophy born out of the Enlightenment era. It's a philosophy, if we have government at all, how it should be and what are its limits, okay? It's a term stolen from leftist anarchists. And in the UK, the term is still kind of associated with Americanism, and it's kind of seen as some sort of foreign idea. Nothing could be further from the truth. It was born here, in my view, here in the UK. Adam Smith, certainly through the economic sense of the word, and other Enlightenment figures. So, as I say, we stole it from left-wing anarchists. It has its roots in individualism and classic liberal ideas about the rights of man. It doesn't have a single foundation of originators, such as John Locke and the idea of natural rights. That's part of it, but it's something that grew organically into what we have today. It's for the greater part predicated on the rights of the individual and the concept, at least, of individual rights and liberties. Look after the rights of the individual, and you can't fail to look after the rights of everyone. Self-ownership, property rights, without which you really have no other rights when you get down to it. The first thing everyone owns, even an untouchable living in the gutter in India, as far as libertarians are concerned, first thing that person owns is themselves. They have self-ownership. And that means that they cannot be touched, harmed, or should not be touched, harmed, abused, used, unless they give express permission. It's about individual sovereignty. So no one is allowed to use me, enslave me, force me to do anything against my will, touch me without express permission or consent. And this is at the heart of libertarianism. And that is what results in our view about government. Government being, in a sense, in nature, force, it should be kept to a very bare minimum with minimum powers. What libertarianism is not, it's not a religious philosophy or a panacea for life's ills. It doesn't tell you how you should live your life. I openly admit I don't know exactly what's best for myself a lot of the time. So how in the hell am I going to know what's best for someone else's life? Someone different to me in race, religion, background, tastes? I don't know. We have the humility as libertarians to admit that your life is yours. Live it as you see fit, as long as you don't impede or infringe on the rights of others to do the same. Certainly government doesn't know what's best for your life. It's often confused with the free market conservatism. There is some overlap, but conservatives are generally paternalistic. And most conservatives that I met feel that the role of government is to make people good, i.e. to encourage people or to force people to do what the right thing. You take drugs, that's a bad thing, you know, so we'll lock you up for that. So that would be one of the differences there. So incorporated into that is the non-aggression principle. Don't use force or violence to further your ideas or further what it is that you want to do, okay? You don't use violence against peaceful people to achieve your goals. Not to be confused with pacifism, which means you never get engaged in violence or violent conflict. You are allowed to use violence in order to defend yourself, because this is part of libertarian philosophy as well. You own yourself, you're allowed to defend your property. So you're allowed to defend yourself with violence. It can also include third-party defense, but you do not initiate the use of force with peaceful people. You have the right to life. So in other words, no one should harm or kill you if you aren't a physical threat to anyone else. You have a right to property, which again, I said, is the first thing you own is yourself, and anything else that you acquire without theft, fraud, or the use of force. Libertarians oppose taxation accordingly, especially if it's involuntary taxation. If I agree or I contract to pay a contribution, that's a different matter. And that would be a violation of property rights if it's involuntary. Right to contract, in terms of who you enter into an agreement with, what you put in your body, what job you do, what medical treatment you seek. It's entirely up to you, because you have a right to do that as an individual. The right to free speech in the public domain, okay? I have a right to say what I like in the public domain. At this moment in time, I'm part of this podcast. You guys are in charge of it. If at any time I say anything that you think is over the mark, you can say, Tom, you can either stop saying that or you can leave the podcast. That's entirely up to you. You have the freedom to do that in this thing that you've set up. But in a public domain, government certainly should not be putting restrictions on what people say. Right to liberty, unless you violate someone else's, the right to work, and the right to learn. So is libertarianism good or bad? Well, what's good, what's bad? Who would say that free speech is bad? Well, some people's feelings get hurt when you say things that are, that offend them. Sometimes you could say something that somebody else may take as an encouragement to go out and do an act of violence. Is that responsibility? I think not. Fossil fuels, are those a good thing? I think by and large, yes, although they have caused some harm. Anybody who found a starving man would think it would be a good thing to give him a square meal. However, if you don't know anything about medical treatment, you're probably going to kill him if you give him a full meal if he's starving. So therefore, a good thing would be bad in that situation. So what is good? Is it good intentions or is it good results? I think with good results overall, libertarianism, the freer that a society is, the less government interference, the more prosperous the society becomes. So, sorry, I've lost the thread here. Free markets, free speech, free expression, and free people maximize human well-being and flourishing, all of which are preferable to government overreach and the infringement of individual rights and liberties. And I think libertarianism promotes that, fights for that, stands for that, and that ultimately is a good thing for the individual, and it's also a good thing for people in general. That's me.
Thank you, Cam. So, Yaron, is there anything wrong with the things that we've heard?
Sure. So first, thanks, Thomas, for joining us. Really appreciate it. And let me say, on issue by issue, Thomas and I will probably agree on many of the political stands. I don't know if all of them, but certainly on most of them, we would be in agreement. But the problem is that the idea of libertarianism and the concept of libertarianism is ill-defined. I mean, even Thomas had a hard time, or Tom had a hard time defining it at the end. We heard no definition, and even the people under this big umbrella, Adam Smith is a libertarian, but he supported a central bank. the libertarians support a central bank? Does supporting a central bank exclude you from being a libertarian? Tea Party. Oh my God. I mean, I was there with the Tea Party, but the Tea Party was pro-Medicare and Social Security, and you know, in many respects, a lot of things that I think Tom, on an issue by issue, would completely disagree with. I've seen communist libertarians, I've seen socialist libertarians, I've seen obviously anarchist libertarians, I've seen left anarchist libertarians, I've seen right anarchist libertarians, so-called anarcho-capitalist. Maybe that's for another day, why that is a contradiction in terms. And then, of course, there's the bleeding heart libertarians, who are, by the way, philosophers for the most part. So if you go to the Bleeding Heart Libertarian website, these are real deep thinkers who have, and yet many of them stand by UBI, universal basic income. They stand by some kind of welfare state, even in this libertarian political ideal that they have. Tom is not a pacifist. I'm very happy to hear that. But, you know, there are many libertarians who are pacifists, literally pacifists, particularly when it comes to foreign policy pacifists, you know, attack him. I mean, I've read their articles out on the Mises website and other places. I mean, real pacifists. I certainly am not. So what is it? What are the core? And here I think this is a fundamental problem, even though everybody agrees on supposedly the non-aggression principle, but do they? The Tea Party certainly didn't agree with it. You can't have Medicare and Social Security without aggression. Adam Smith didn't agree with it. The Scottish Enlightenment generally didn't agree with it. There was a lot of aggression. Now, minimal aggression, better than anybody else. I'll take the Scottish Enlightenment any day over pretty much anybody. But there was still aggression. You know, the communist libertarians might claim to be to uphold the non-aggression principle, but you know, I would worry about them ever reaching power if they would stick to that. I doubt it. So the main problem with or one big problem with libertarianism is that it's not clear what it refers to. It's not clear whether it has a consistent set of ideas and a consistent set of principles, which I think is problematic. Now, if you start your own kind of political party like Scottish Libertarians, maybe you can then delimit, okay, these are the things we stand for. But as a movement, particularly globally, it's very, you know, ambiguous and difficult and contradictory in terms of what they stand for. You know, Ayn Rand, you mentioned all the different things that people called libertarians. I think P.J. O'Rourke stole his definition from Ayn Rand, because Ayn Rand talked about libertarians being hippies of the right. That was her definition in the 1970s. And the idea was not, I think, just that she, you know, she agreed, for example, on something like drug legalization. It's the relish with which libertarians often take drug legalization because they so want to be using them that I think she objected to. But this is really the fundamental issue I have with libertarianism, and that is that it is an ambiguous political philosophy at best, but it has no real foundation. It has no philosophical foundation. It has no moral foundation. It has no epistemological foundation. And this is, you know, it's based on, for most people, based on this idea, you know, basically on a kind of subjectivist approach. We want everybody to be able to do whatever the hell they want. And who's anybody to intervene? And let them just do it. And we're not going to judge. Tom said that a little bit, right? You have your religion, you have your this, you have your that. We're not going to judge you. You can do whatever you want. It's live and let live, but it accepts implicitly a very subjectivist approach to morality. I think such an approach, anything related to subjectivism, is very dangerous and ultimately can easily lead to the violation of a non-aggression principle. I have a problem with what the non-aggression principle even is. Is it a principle? What's it based on? Why not be aggressive, right? almost every philosophy in the world accepts aggression if the goal is a good goal, right? If the purpose is a good purpose. So why not? What is the justification for the non-aggression principle? I don't think libertarians have one. I think this is a real flaw in the libertarian movement. Self-ownership is a problem. Who owns you? I mean, it's a circular argument, right? Ownership is a concept of self. Self owns, right? But what are you owning if you are the owner? It's philosophically a very unsatisfying concept. You have sovereignty over self. That's a different concept. But self-ownership is a tricky concept and very difficult to justify out there in the world, as the non-aggression principle is. If good can be achieved, and you don't want to define good, none of us, right? The whole point of libertarianism, or part of the point of we don't want to define good for you. So if I can show you that good could be achieved, my good could be achieved, our good could be achieved by using force, then what's the argument against that if we're not in the business of defining good? So you can't really have a political theory. You can't really have a political ideology or political philosophy without some definition of good. Not a political philosophy that's universal. You can hold a certain view, but it's not universalizable. Is that a word? You can't make it universal unless you have a view of what the good is. Individual rights are a concept that is based on a philosophical identification, based on an identification about your life, about what is good. So, for example, there is no such thing as individual rights unless you understand that what is good is that individuals should have the capacity and have the ability, and it's right for them, right, in a moral sense, to make decisions for themselves. But that's a moral statement. That is a statement about what the good is. So, and that reason is the means by which they should do it. And the enemy of reason is force. Therefore, we should ban force from human interaction because it's not good for individuals in the pursuit of their happiness. But that has a lot of goods in it, has a lot of morality in it. And indeed, individual rights at the end of the day is a moral, not a political concept. It's a concept that bridges morality to politics. As a consequence, I think, it's this subjectivism, it's this lack of willingness to identify the good and to delve into morality, and to identify objective standards for human well-being. That is, there are certain things that are objectively good for human beings that we can dictate, if you will, not dictate in terms of force, but dictate in terms of ideology, in terms of ideas. It is the unwillingness to say these set of ideas are the right ideas at the foundation that make a concept like anarchy and supposed anarcho-capitalism possible. Because anarcho-capitalism is the exactly rejection of any kind of objective standard. It is the view that anything goes. Literally anything goes, because now there's no government even to protect individual rights. So even individual rights are gone once you accept anarchy. If my police force, the one I hire, doesn't believe in individual rights and can get enough subscriptions, it might dominate, and individual rights are out. They're irrelevant. So anarchy excludes individual rights, rejects individual rights. And it rejects any kind of objective view of morality, an objective view of human life, an objective view of what are the standards by which human beings need to flourish. So I would love to see a libertarian movement, libertarian party, that delimited what it stood for, that made clear what it was about, that rejected things like anarchy and things like the Tea Party and even Adam Smith, if necessary, and that accepted the idea that any movement towards liberty, any movement, any real success in terms of changing the world towards freedom and liberty is going to require the identification of clear moral, ethical standards. it's going to require a clear identification of a philosophy of liberty, not just politics. Politics is a derivative. Politics is the last thing that matters in the end. What matters ultimately is why liberty, why freedom. We have to be able to answer that question. And to answer that question is a moral answer. And we need an ethic. And this is Ayn Rand. This is what objectivism provides. And I think the rejection or the evasion of Ayn Rand by libertarian intellectuals and leaders over the decades has done a lot of harm to the movement, to whatever movement there is, has done a lot of harm to the to ability to promote these ideas. What libertarians need is some objective morality and an objective view of the world, and that's what Rand provides. So I encourage libertarians to embrace Rand. Thanks.
Thank you, Yaron.
And to begin with, I wonder if I can ask you to capsulize, I know this is difficult, can I ask you to capsulize your philosophy? What is Randism?
First of all, I do not call it Randism, and I don't like that name. I call it objectivism.
All right.
Meaning a philosophy based on objective reality. Now let me explain it as briefly as I can. First, my philosophy is based on the concept that reality exists as an objective absolute, that man's mind, reason, is his means of perceiving it, and that man needs a rational morality. I am primarily the creator of a new code of morality which has so far been believed impossible, namely a morality not based on faith.
On faith?
Not on faith, not on arbitrary whim, not on emotion, not on arbitrary edict, mystical or social, but on reason, a morality which can be proved by means of logic, which can be demonstrated to be true and necessary.
All right, all right.
Now, may I define what my morality is?
All right.
Because this is merely an introduction. My morality is based on man's life as a standard of value. And since man's mind is his basic means of survival, I hold that if man wants to live on earth and to live as a human being, he has to hold reason as an absolute, by which I mean that he has to hold reason as his only guide to action, and that he must live by the independent judgment of his own mind, that his highest moral purpose is the achievement of his own happiness, and that he must not force other people, nor accept their right to force him, that each man must live as an end in himself and follow his own rational self-interest.
May I?
All right, before we go on, reminder, please like the show. We've got 163 live listeners right now, 30 likes. That should be at least 100. I figure at least 100 of you actually like the show. Maybe there are like 60 of the Matthews out there who hate it, but at least the people who are liking it, you know, I want to see a thumbs up. There you go. Start liking it. I want to see that go to 100. All it takes is a click of a thing, whether you're looking at this. And you know, the likes matter. It's not an issue of my ego. It's an issue of the algorithm. The more you like something, the more the algorithm likes it. So, you know, and if you don't like the show, give it a thumbs down. Let's see your actual views being reflected in the likes. But if you like it, don't just sit there. Help get the show promoted. Of course, you should also share, and you can support the show at yaronbrookshow.com/support, or on Patreon or Subscribestar or Locals, and show your support for the work, for the value hopefully you're receiving from this. And of course, don't forget, if you're not a subscriber, even if you just come here to troll, or even if you're here like Matthew to defend Marx, then you should subscribe, because that way you'll know when to show up. You'll know what shows are on, when they're on. You'll get notified, right? So, yes, like, share, subscribe, support. Like, share, subscribe, support. There you go. Easy. Do one or all of those, please.